What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to my channel, Alchemist. Justin here. Now, are you ready to get into those lunar shenanigans? Because this is an interesting week. It's doing that thing that we've been doing for a couple of weeks where it'll start off nice, and then we got a hard aspect that we'll face. And then it's like as this lunar stuff is happening, there's that Mars Mercury conjunction that's building up in the background and all of this. And so we're really going to want to tune in and think about how we're all showing up, how we're managing the emotions, how we're feeling through these emotions, and how, that where we're focusing our emotions and our energies there. So we'll get into all that here in a moment. But if you're new here, again, my name is Justin. And one of the things that I do in this channel is talk about the lunar shenanigans, which just goes over the astrology of the moon, what sign it's in, what phase it's in, when it happens to go void, of course, and just to get a feel of the energies throughout the week as the moon is having these different conversations with the other celestial bodies and distributing these energies to us. So I'll be going over the week of and I'll be going over the week of October 14th through the 20th. But before we jump into this thing, a little housekeeping. If you want to support my work even further there, kind of help me along there, I've created a Patreon where I have this new podcast that I've been doing, and it's called the Lucky Day Podcast, and it just goes over the auspicious dates for the month for any elections that you want to start off, whether it's buying a car, getting a home, planning a vacation, sending an email, whatever that happens to look like for you. That is going to cover all of those dates, and so if that's something where there's two tiers for on my Patreon, so if that's something that you want to get involved with and get the extra perks that comes with that, definitely check that out. There's a link for my Patreon down in the description box there. Now let's go ahead and get into this thing here because, like I said, I'm going to cover the week of October 14th to the 20th. And like I said, we're starting off green. We always love when we're starting off green because, it's really nice. We get out on a Tuesday, the 14th of October. The moon is first going to wrap up its time in Cancer, picking up, gathering all of its things. And at about 3:47 a.m., that's going to be Pacific time, the moon will move from Cancer into Leo. And now what I like about the moon in Leo, one is that it's in a nice, if you're looking at the chart here, I got with the moon just ingressed into Leo. Now that the moon's ingress there over these next couple of days is going to have this nice sextile that's going to be forming with the sun that we'll talk about in a little bit, but it has this harmonious relationship with one, its ruler, but also with Venus, who's just entered her home, which is really nice of Libra. And when you think about Leo, first, before we kind of dissect that moon sextile Venus, Leo is ruled by the sun. They're the fixed fire sign and they're active or yang in nature. And I think that this is a time with the moon being in Leo for thinking about the things that inspire us, that fuel us up, that lights, that shines that light. When you think about Leo, it's, when they're in their energy, they can't help but that energy but permeate throughout the room. And that's why I think it's like looking for that inner light with Leo and finding the things that fuel that, doing those things regularly. A word that I like that I've been really kind of working with Leo is like consistent, especially with that fixed quality. If you're consistent with the things that are fueling you up, it's just going to burn brighter and brighter and brighter. That oven's going to be warm. It's going to be generous. It's like a big hug when you think about Leo energy. And I think that ties in really nicely with the sextile to Venus because it's like right after the moon enters it. What a lovely way to be greeted. As soon as you enter into another sign, then you got Venus there saying, what's up? And that's going to be, when you think about the sextile, that's when the celestial bodies are about 60 degrees apart from one another. And they're similar to the trine, it's just a little bit weaker, but there's this sympathetic nature and this beneficial that comes with the sextile. But again, it requires a bit of initiative, but this can be one where we're either doing those kind of Venusian things. This could be go hanging out with friends. This could be having a phone call with a family member. This could be, where there's a lot of laughter and merriment when we're thinking about Venus. This could be doing some sort of like self-care thing. Maybe this is some form of expression. You're building, you're creating, whatever that's looking like. You're playing. This is light. I love Venus in Libra. I like this feel, this kind of starting off, this kind of like this kind of on a Tuesday there. So if you find that if you can find any sort of little times for enjoyment, this could be like, doing working with some like essential oils, do something special, don't take a bath, put some rose petals in it. Whatever that's looking like, go buy yourself something nice, maybe update your wardrobe, go get your hair cut, maybe clean your, whatever that's looking like. Venus things can be real simple, really easy, but they can have these really kind of strong impacts, help you feel more confident, more beautiful, just in a better mood. When I think about that relationship between Venus and the moon, and when those two are close to each other, and as they're starting to get closer, Venus and the moon in the sky is always a really beautiful sight. So that's just something I think to think about as we're starting off this Tuesday, kind of bottle all of this energy up too, because we're going to need it. We're going to need it because then we're moving into Wednesday. And that's where we get the 15th of October. We're in that waning crescent phase still. And this is how we're kind of winding down this lunar cycle, something to keep in mind of, because after this we'll be getting into the new moon phase. But first off, the moon is going to have as the moon moves along, the moon is going to form a square with Mercury. And so this could be where there's tensions in the conversations, possibly. Maybe if we haven't made enough time to take care of ourselves, do those Venusian things, get some rest, go appreciate something, go out in nature, then that could lead to this mental fatigue. And then there's a sensitivity, I think, that happens, when you're feeling off your game, or if you're feeling groggy, feeling tired, feeling whatever, then that can affect how we communicate. The more likelihood of emotions are going to be projected, I think, when we think about the moon kind of square Mercury. And this could come up in how we, the things we're feeling in our body can come out in our speech. And then it can create where, the next aspect, this moon squaring Mars, that's where the hardness kind of comes in there, because now it's in the overcoming aspect. Mars, it's in its home sign, so that's helpful, but it's still a tense aspect with the malefic, because when you think about the squares, that's when the celestial bodies are 90 degrees apart, and squares are inharmonious and just they're uncomfortable. There's this tension that's needing to happen. Something is needing to move, maybe an agitation, a frustration, when we're thinking about that. And keep in mind too, because now if you're looking at the chart here, if you check out that Scorpio section, Mercury and now just got within the 3-degree range of Mars. So now it's really, that energy is just keeps getting more potent. And so we're really gonna again want to be mindful. If you got things that you're working through, finding constructive ways to talk about them, finding constructive ways to channel them. Let's say if you can't find the words for them, then go for a run. Maybe go yell in your pillow. Go, one of my things to do when I was feeling frazzled, I remember working in like food business, just like going in the freezer real quick. Just going in the cooler and just literally cooling off for a minute to let the hot emotions just kind of build down. Go take a cold shower, go for a swim, something, something along those lines. Because what I really like about this is that with that moon sextiling the sun, it's not as strong, but I think there's an opportunity for us to be able to handle this martial energy, this square, constructively, because it's interesting that the moon is squaring this right as things are starting to build up, with this conjunction that's happening. But I think that, the sun is how we take action, and I think that there's an opportunity here, I think, to lead by example, because not everyone's going to be necessarily feeling this squares as tense. It may be depending on your chart, and that's something to bring up too. This may be more personally for you now with the moon being in Leo. If you have fixed placements, a preponderance of fixed placements, that's going to be Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, or Taurus. This one may be more actively working with you. But if this is not where this is a tense pocket for you, this could be, I think, even a time to extend some compassion a little bit, because that Mercury Mars conjunction, let's say, for example, you have like a friend who might be feeling kind of off there, and then the response, maybe a reactive response would be like, oh, what are you doing? Like, how come you don't seem to, you're ignoring me, or you're doing this, you're all up in your feelings. But they might be dealing with something serious. I've been talking with some people, and the mutable sign, and that's one thing I've noticed a lot with these people that have in common. A lot of mutable signs seem to be under kind of eating it right now, especially with like Saturn kind of moving back and ticking back at those late degrees there. So you never know what someone's going on there or what's going on in someone's world, what they're focused on. So this could be a great time to just extend some compassion, to be a leader, to I almost think to even like apply that sense of kind of like tough love, where it's just like, hey, I know you're navigating through this thing, and that's fine. I'm going to give you the space to figure that out, but we got to move though at some point. Try to figure out how to move through this thing. Figure out some solutions to whatever happens to be building up within these next few days. Because then we get to Thursday, the 16th of October, and then the moon is going to wrap up its time in Leo and move into Virgo at about 11:05 a.m. and that's Pacific time. And now this is going to shift now if you have, speaking of the mutable signs, if you have a lot of mutable placements, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, they may be feeling that kind of lunar energy kind of moving through there. But when we think about the moon in Virgo, Virgo's is ruled by Mercury and is the mutable earth sign and is receptive or yin in nature. And what I like about moon in Virgo is that this is a very analytical moon. This is a problem solving moon. This is, really kind of like, okay, let me take in that receptive part of Virgo. Let me take in what's, the facts, take in what's, the information, and then let's change things, the mutable things. And the earth sign is working with the physical there. So this could be where, okay, if you've been feeling a lot of agitation, again, taking those active steps and making those things happen, like buying the punching bag, going for, go getting those running shoes or whatever that is, buying those things, to getting those tools to help you better, or to help us better navigate these energies here, because things are starting to build up with this. There's no aspects that are completing yet with this, but again, I'm just keep looking at that Mercury Mars thing, and it's just a ticking away here. But the interesting thing with this, and again, I don't think this has to be one where it can, because this doesn't feel necessarily like a big, I don't want to say not a big thing. It doesn't feel as explosive as when I feel like when Mars and Mercury have their conjunction in Sag. That one feels different. This one feels like a prelude to something, when we're building this thing up. And when we get into Friday, the 17th of October, the moon is going to form a sextile with both Mars and Mercury, and so this is a beneficial aspect. But it's going to require us to figure out what is changing. This could be some type of news that's coming out there, with that Mercury, something that could, again, potentially get the feelings riled up, because now the moon's under the rulership of Mercury. Mercury is closing in on Mars. Now we're about a little over a degree away at this point. So, pay attention to what you're feeling, pay attention to what other people are feeling, how those energies may be, being projected outwards. So, and not just in just like you're just being out and about. Think about it on like the internet too, how we're receiving those informations, what we're feeling through there. Because what I like about this energy too, with that focus of the more kind of constructive of that Mars Mercury conjunction, is that we can really kind of focus in on the things that are going on within us. This can be a really kind of introspective time to make any sort of corrections there. It's like, what I have been maybe coming in a little hot. I've been maybe making enemies where I don't need to be, so instead kind of turning my allies into enemies. So that's just something I think to kind of pay attention to there. There's a chance, I think, to really collectively, if we all take these active steps, to try to be as mindful and as aware of how we're presenting ourselves, it ripples out into the world there. But we get to Saturday, the 18th of October, another kind of neutral day there. And before the moon moves into Libra, the moon's going to first form a sextile with Big Papa, which is really nice, and this is Jupiter in the overcoming position. So Jupiter is that relief from all bad things. Jupiter wants to bring abundance. It wants to bring large gifts. It can bring, this could be even because the thing I like to think, because this is another day that's kind of a mixed bag, because even though there are harsh things that are happening, there still are really good things that are happening too. You have people, I just had a friend just tell me they just just had a baby not too long ago. And, there's all this really good someone does. That's just got a car, little things like maybe going on like little trips and things. So there's stuff that's still goodness that's still happening that's happening around us. And I think that moon sextiling Jupiter is a chance to try to feel that, to try to, or this could even be where it's having faith, if maybe things have been really kind of tough and you're not quite sure. Maybe this is just like maybe you happen to be where Mars or Saturn is kind of emphasized this year. Jupiter is a planet. It represents that sense of trust and faith, that trust in the sense of like receiving things, inheritances. But I also think that trusting too of something bigger happening, that there's always going to be just as sometimes it can feel like the good times are fleeting, the bad times or the more challenging times can be fleeting too. But first we got to go through them, because then that's where this moon opposite Saturn retrograde comes in. And, I think when we think about when we talk about oppositions, that's when the celestial bodies are in opposite signs from one another. So the moon, not on this chart here, but the moon will have been in Virgo still, and Saturn will be, being in Pisces. The oppositions are the hardest aspect. They create this sense of adversity. It's a risk, especially when we're talking with the malefics. So when we're thinking about Saturn can bring about anxieties. You pay attention to that, especially in Virgo, paying attention to like any kind of anxieties that maybe be felt in the body. Any kind of like, there's a laziness or sluggishness. So, because when you feel trapped by Saturn, those obstacles and hindrances, like, okay, it's going to be good, but okay, when though, that sense of that things take time can really wane on a person. It can feel suffocating sometimes, where you're not quite sure how to, how you're going to keep going in all of that. There, Saturn really tests the faith, but I don't think it's these malefics do that just again to keep us down. It's that balance in life. If things were just always easy, nothing would get done. So the malefics are that push, but sometimes it can be it's a forceful push, and I think that it's remembering to, I think sometimes too what can happen with Saturn is that, you think that, oh, well, if it's going to take forever, why even bother? Why even do this thing? But I'm like, I think with Saturn stuff, it's like, if it's going to take time, if I'm going to get there anyway, how can I enjoy the process? How can I make this so doesn't feel as long as it could be? And we're talking about with Saturn being in Pisces, it doesn't feel as long here. So, it's an interesting, this is why this day is kind of a bit of a mixed bag. I think if you are feeling that sense of restrictions, hindrances, and things like that, then calling on a friend, calling on someone who can provide some sort of help, that can bring in that sense of love, who's maybe can remind you that you're right, this isn't permanent. I'm just going through maybe one of those chapters there, or we're maybe collectively going through those chapters, but there's something that's trying to move too. Because what I like that's happening towards the end of the week here is that on a Sunday, the 19th of October, I got ahead of myself there before we get into that. Then the moon moves into Libra. We process all these things here, and then where are we going from there? We get to moon in Libra at about 9:01 p.m. And when you think about the moon in Libra, we're shifting to the mind now. And Libra is the cardinal air sign, active or yang in nature, and is ruled by the benefic Venus. So this is like, how can I initiate from a balanced place? When we're thinking about with Libra, how can I? Libra, I think, is very much about trying to keep that harmony because it has that influence of Venus. And now that the moon is co-present with its ruler Venus, this is just as extra nice here. Venus, and the thing too that I want to point out about this, with now the moon being here. And what I've loved about Venus being in Libra is that, actually, when I'm recording this today, Venus is just about to enter into Libra. So, but what I really like about this energy too is that both Venus now and the moon here for this next couple of days, they're not being witnessed by the malefics. Mars can't see it because it's in a semi-sextile, and then it's in conjunct with Pisces. So this is nice here. And I say that there's an opportunity, I think, for this niceness, even though, let's get to this next side here, because now we get to Sunday, the 19th of October. And right as the moon is forming that conjunction with Venus, and that's going to happen at about 7 degrees and 8 minutes of Libra. And this is something, too, if you have a lot of cardinal placements, Libra, Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, this may be working more personally with while the moon's going through here. But it's like right on the time of this conjunction with Venus and the moon, that conjunction with Mars and Mercury is about to come to completion here. So we're at the apex. And so this, I think with the moon being here, I don't think that this is it by accident that this is happening. The benefics are about pulling us together, about keeping us as one. The malefics are separating, and dividing. So this, I think, is a time to focus on who is raising, to channel that focus maybe of that Mercury, Mars, and just like, who's on my team? Focus on those people, focus on those relationships, put my energy there into the ones that make me feel good, that make me feel protected, that feel supported in whatever as we're going through these times. Because whenever there is, because when malefics are going to do what they're going to do, if there's going to be a crisis, then we should at least let's have a team. Let's have some people in our corners there so that we can pool resources, so that it's not just like a big hit where we feel alone in this thing. That's what I think the benefics try to do in this. That's what the moon is trying to do. So I think with this one too, is not a being afraid of reaching out, to just like say, just like a, hey, do you got a minute to talk? I've really just been kind of just like maybe processing some things, and I just need a friendly ear, something along those lines. So just something I think to just kind of pay attention to there, because look at how the moon's, it's like we were ending on a really green note. I think even despite what's going on here. And I don't think it's going to be something that is necessarily easy, but the moon is at least trying to make it easy. It's trying to end this chapter on a good note here, because we get into Monday, the 20th of October. And as you see here, the moon, right before the moon is about to complete it, we start this new lunar cycle with new lunar cycle here. Moon is going to have an overcoming square from Jupiter. Then Jupiter is in the sign that the moon rules, and Jupiter's exalted here. But again, the squares are something that it's taking the dissonance in the things that we're feeling, because now as we get onto the other end of this, that Mars Mercury thing is just starting to separate, just moving on here. So the news has come out, the things have happened, so it's just like, what are we going to do going forward? I think that's the question that Jupiter is asking here. And who are we moving forward with? I think it's going to be a big question as we get ready to wrap up this lunar cycle. This has been a really kind of active one, and I think that it's only going to continue to get active. October we're wrapping up things, but November is going to be busy. Let's go ahead and shift over. But yeah, November is going to be a busy time, and I think that this, what this moon is doing with Jupiter here is, again, to try to bring people together. To try to bring some goodness, to try to, whatever damage has happened, how can we clean this up? Because, when you think about it, just even after let's say like a storm or something, you got to clean things up, where there's feelings, around that sense of loss and destruction, but there is that hope that you can plant the seeds for renewal. We can build newer, stronger, better. I think that's what the benefics are trying to do, and it's just a part of that dance. I don't think that it's ever trying to be out of balance. It's just how we interpret, these signals that are coming here. The planets aren't doing this to us. This is the signs that are coming there, and it's just like, how do we want to navigate this? Because with that, I think one last point I want to make with that Mercury-Mars thing is that it's in fixed energy, so I think that things that happen underneath that are going to have long-term, they're going to last a while. There's stamina with that. So especially if there's any sort of like animosity, so you want to be mindful about that, because that might be something that might get revisited later when Mercury comes back retrograde to this point and has that square with Mars again. So be mindful of where you're channeling your energy, where we're focusing, how we're showing up. Let's try to channel this, be as constructive with these malefics as possible. Try to mitigate the challenges as much as we possibly can. The things are going to happen. So let's, it's like I say, if we see a storm coming, how are we getting prepped? And that's really what we can do in this journey there. And I don't try to say that it's something that's disheartening, but as encouraging, because there is something that we can do. And I think that that's hopeful, and I like that. So I'm gonna leave that there, and on a green note. So, but if this is something where, if you want to see how this is showing up in your chart, whether it's monitoring the transits, or this is doing a perfection, looking at your perfections for the year, or this could be whatever, learning your natal chart, however you want to get into this. Down in the description box, there is a link to book a consultation with me. So whether it be for elections, or doing just an actual consultation for your readings and things, then all that is down there. There's a link for that. And if you have any questions about the services that I provide, there is my email's down there. So definitely feel free to reach out to me, and comment on this. Let us let me know how you've been navigating this week. I will say personally, well, I mean, I can't speak for this week, but the pre, because we're not there yet. we're just getting started. But for last week, I will say overall it was a bit of a mixed bag there. I have a lot of fixed placements, so that Mars, Mercury stuff going through Scorpio has been a bit of trickiness, but I've been like, I'm really, when I'm recording this, Venus is just about to enter into Libra, so I'm banking on that one. I'm about to milk that for all it's worth. So, yeah, because it's been tricky. It's been a little trickiness, but overall, I've been trying to dip into, because I'm in a Venus year, so I've been dipping more into that Venusian energy, taking more time for myself, doing more self-care things, so this, like, those things can help. Just any small things to tap into that benefic energy. So, but yeah, that's how I've been kind of navigating this week. And I've noticed that it's felt like it's been a lot for the people around me. That's where I've been trying to be an anchor, there for people to kind of be able to talk with and navigate these things. So, whether it be clients or friends, family, to just try to figure out where we're going through, and all this thing. So that's been a unique juxtaposition, trying to see that, mine versus what's happening with other people. So that's been something to kind of navigate there. So comment to let us know how you've been kind of getting through this thing. And I think that it all comes into us just knowing that sometimes, we can, we're having hard times, and then other times we're having good times. Because, I was talking about all the things that I was doing, and then, to hear that difference, it was just like, oh man, but then from there, and they're like, it is good to hear that there's some good happening, so that, again, just like, it gives me some hope. So it's like we can kind of play off each other there. So, but yeah, I think that's. Oh, and then if you want to, one other last little housekeeping thing down in the description box. There's a couple of links for some playlists for one's for the Celestial News Monthly, which goes over where the sun and the other celestial bodies are transiting, what signs are going to be most affected, and how to most practically work with those energies. And then there's a tab for the Lunar Shenanigans, obviously, if you want to go through that stuff as well there. Oh, and I do this, I knew there's something else. There's these videos that I'm doing, that little series that I do of different celestial bodies and different zodiac signs in different houses. So, and I have those all done by playlist there, and I've just been kind of doing them as the dice tell me. Hold on, let me fix the dice. But as the dice have been telling me to, or as the results come up. So that's something you want to interest in, just like my thoughts and what are some ways to approach or to think about how these things may have showed up in your life. That's what those videos are meant to be there for. So definitely check that out. But until next time, stay mindful out there. You keep eyes on that moon. And I will catch you on the next one in the next lunar cycle.